This is the Holy Land Timeline, bringing the Bible to life from the Holy Land.
Walking the ground where history meets faith. You're listening to the Holy Land Path on the Holy Land Timeline. Here are your hosts, Ethan and Sarah.
Welcome to the Holy Land Path.
It's so great to be here for this one.
Yeah, I'm really excited about today because, I want you, the listener, to imagine discovering, the black box of an ancient empire.
Oh, that's a perfect way to describe it.
Right. Just this frantic 4-meter-long scroll written by a man who is literally watching his entire nation collapse.
Yeah, under sudden plagues of blood and darkness and just mass death.
Exactly. And usually when we study ancient history, we are looking at these massive monuments that were, built to project perfection.
Right, the PR of the ancient world.
Yeah, exactly. But today, we aren't just looking at the polished stones of the Bible. We are going to be reading the terrifying, raw eyewitness accounts of the Egyptians themselves.
Which is just incredible.
It is, because we're looking at a historical landscape that is, frankly, incredibly muddy. It's obscured by thousands of years of shifting sands and, ruined empires.
Right. But when we search for the historical footprints of the Israelite exodus from Egypt, we find that the ground is actually far from silent.
Oh, man, it is definitely not silent.
It truly is shouting at us if you know how to listen. I mean, we are dealing with fragments of black granite, remnants of papyrus scrolls, and the shadows of these collapsed dynasties.
Yeah.
But what is so captivating about this journey, and I know you agree, is that while faith itself does not require physical proof, right?
Right, of course.
Because faith operates on a completely different spiritual axis. But uncovering these ancient stones and scrolls that echo the biblical narrative, it just deeply enriches our understanding.
It really does.
It helps us trace the footsteps of the Lord in his land. I mean, it gives an incredible tactile texture to the sacred text that we hold so dear.
And that is exactly our mission today. We are taking you, our listener, on a special deep dive to thoroughly explore the historical, archaeological, and textual evidence surrounding the Israelite sojourn in Egypt.
The whole journey.
Yeah, the whole thing. The Exodus and the eventual entry into the Promised Land. And I have to say, our stack of sources today is just immense.
It's a massive stack.
It is. We have rigorous archaeological analyses of ancient Egyptian monuments, like the famous Merneptah Stela.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about that one.
Me too. And we have the transcript of an incredible lecture by the renowned Egyptologist, Dr. Manfred Beitak.
His work is just foundational.
Completely. And then we're also looking at secular medical and climate studies that are attempting to trace the actual physical mechanisms of the plagues.
Which is fascinating, the science side of it.
Right. Plus, we have fresh translations of ancient documents like the poetic Ipuwer papyrus and these frantic diplomatic Amarna letters.
It is a profound stack of information. And I think it reminds us that while the ancient world often seems mute, like I said, if you tune into the right frequencies, it's actually broadcasting its history at us.
Because today, we aren't just memorizing, dry dates on a timeline.
No, not at all.
We are going to examine ancient Egyptian medical records that document the desperate treatment of plague-like symptoms.
Real doctors trying to deal with real fallout.
Yeah, and we are going to read a chaotic lament that mirrors the book of Exodus to an astonishing, terrifying degree.
It's chilling to read.
And we will read literal clay tablets from a desperate Canaanite king pleading for military backup against a group of incoming nomads called the Habiru.
But, before we can really look at the physical evidence of the Exodus, we have to know exactly when to look.
That's a huge point.
The timeline is the absolute foundation of all archaeological inquiry. Because if you dig in the wrong layer of dirt, or if you are off by a few centuries, you're going to find the entirely wrong story.
You'll just look at an empty landscape and conclude the event never happened.
Exactly.
Which opens up the great debate over the chronology of the Exodus. Because if you were to ask a secular historian today, or, if you just watched the classic Hollywood movie.
Oh, yeah, I think Yul Brynner.
Right, Yul Brynner or those animated epics, you are always told that Ramses II, Ramses the Great, was the pharaoh of the Exodus.
Yeah, that's the popular consensus.
And his reign is firmly dated to roughly, 1279 to 1213 BC. So that places the Exodus squarely in the 1200s BC.
Right.
But if we open the biblical text, the math gives us a drastically different calculation.
Yes, and this is where we have to establish our baseline. For you, the listener, because the biblical timeline provides a highly specific chronological marker.
Where is that exactly?
It's in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 6, verse 1.
Okay.
That verse states unequivocally that the Exodus occurred exactly 480 years before King Solomon began laying the foundation for the temple in Jerusalem.
480 years.
Right. Now, across the board, most biblical and secular historical scholars agree that Solomon began constructing the temple right around 960 BC.
Okay, so if we just do the simple math on that.
Yeah, you add 480 years to 960 BC, and that places the Exodus right around 1440 BC.
Wait, hold on. So we have a clear biblical date of roughly 1440 BC.
Exactly.
But the Ramses theory puts it in the 1200s. That is a 200-year difference.
It's a massive gap.
If the Bible gives us this incredibly precise timeline of 1440 BC, why do so many secular scholars and historians just flat out ignore it and insist on the later date of the 1200s? I mean, what are they seeing in the ground that makes them so confident it was Ramses?
Well, it primarily comes down to textual mentions of specific cities and then a very famous massive piece of stone.
Okay, tell me about the cities first.
First, the biblical text in Exodus chapter 1, verse 11, mentions that the Israelite slaves were forced to build the store cities of Pithom and Ramses.
Ah, Ramses, like the Pharaoh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So many scholars point to Pi-Ramesses, which was this magnificent sprawling capital built by Ramses II in the eastern delta of Egypt.
Okay, I see where they're going with this.
They argue that the Israelites must have been enslaved during his reign to build a city that literally bears his name.
I have to challenge that right out of the gate, though.
Go for it.
Because places change names retroactively all the time, right? If I read a history book that says, you know, the Native Americans lived in the area of New York.
Right.
That doesn't mean the city was literally called New York when they originally settled there.
No, of course not.
The biblical text could just be using the name of the region that was common when the book of Exodus was later compiled and edited for future generations, couldn't it?
Exactly, and that is a very common and robust counterargument. Updating place names for later audiences was a standard practice in ancient Near Eastern scribal traditions.
Okay, so the city name isn't a smoking gun.
No, it's not. But the real anchor for the secular timeline, the artifact that scholars constantly point to, is an archaeological marvel called the Merneptah Stela.
The Merneptah Stela.
Yes, it dates to roughly 1207 BCE. That's during the 5th year of the reign of King Merneptah, who was actually the son and successor of Ramses the Great.
Okay, so late 1200s, what exactly is this thing?
It is a massive black granite victory monument. It stands over 10 feet tall.
Wow, 10 feet?
Yeah, it is essentially an ancient billboard erected to boast of the pharaoh's military conquests across the region.
And what makes this specific piece of granite so crucial for our deep dive today?
Because it contains the very first historical extra-biblical mention of the name Israel anywhere in the archaeological record.
Wait, really?
Yes.
In 1207 BC, the name Israel is carved in stone.
Carved in stone. The stela lists various conquests in the land of Canaan, places like Ashkelon, Gezer, and then near the very bottom it says, Israel is wasted, his seed is not.
Oh, wow.
But the true revelation here is not just the phonetic spelling of the name Israel, but how the word is categorized by the scribe.
What do you mean categorized?
So in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, words are often followed by a symbol called a classifier, or a determinative.
Oh, I've seen these. It's almost like, well, like a modern hashtag or an emoji placed at the end of a word to give the reader context.
Yes.
Like if I text the word apple, but I put a computer emoji after it. The tech company, not the fruit.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it, honestly. It tells the reader how to categorize the noun. So for the Canaanite conquest, like Ashkelon and Gezer, the Egyptian scribe used the determinative for a foreign city or a settled, fortified state.
What does that look like?
It's a little carving of a throw stick alongside 3 mountains.
Okay, that makes sense for established city-states.
Right. But for the word Israel, the scribe used a completely different determinative. He carved a man and a woman alongside 3 plural vertical strokes.
Huh. And what does that hashtag mean?
In Egyptian grammar, this specific classifier denotes a nomadic people. It means a wandering ethnic group or a sociocultural entity that is not tied to a settled city-state.
Oh, wow. So the Egyptians are acknowledging Israel exists.
Yes.
But they are explicitly saying these people don't have a permanent fortified capital city yet.
Precisely. It proves definitively that by 1207 BC, Israel was already recognized as a distinct, formidable people group living in the land of Canaan.
But they were still, like, wandering.
Yeah, they were still in their early, tribal, perhaps semi-nomadic phase of settlement. Now, if they were already an established presence in Canaan by 1207,
Yeah.
the Exodus had to have happened much earlier.
Right.
But secular scholars look at that stele and say, well, they're just arriving. The Exodus must have happened just a few decades earlier under Ramses II.
But mathematically, I mean, that still leaves us with a massive, gaping 200-year hole between the secular archaeological model, the 1200s, and the biblical timeline of 1440 BC.
It does.
We have two completely different historical realities here. So are there any theories in our sources that bridge this divide? How do we reconcile the stones with the scriptures?
This requires us to fundamentally rethink how we understand ancient chronologies.
Okay.
See, we are trained in the modern West to view timelines as singular, linear tracks. Event A happens, then event B, then event C.
Right, like a normal timeline.
But an independent scholar named Ann Habermill has put forward a deeply compelling, mathematically rigorous theory regarding divergent, concurrent timelines in Egyptian history.
Concurrent timelines, like two things happening at once.
Exactly. To grasp this, you have to look at how Egyptology was formed in the first place. Standard Egyptian chronology features two massive, total, devastating societal collapses.
Defining collapse here as, like, total systemic failure.
Yes. Complete breakdown of government, mass starvation, the total cessation of monumental building, and chaotic vulnerability to foreign invaders.
Just total ruin.
Total ruin. One of these collapses occurs at the end of the 6th dynasty, which brought the glorious Old Kingdom to a violent end.
Okay.
The second collapse occurs at the end of the 12th dynasty, which violently ended the Middle Kingdom.
So two complete catastrophic collapses of the greatest empire on Earth.
Yes. And Habermill points out that the general patterns, the descriptions of the chaos, and the specific societal markers of these two dark periods are incredibly suspiciously similar. Now, in standard textbook chronology, these two collapses are separated by hundreds of years. But Habermill suggests a paradigm shift. She asks, what if these two dynasties, the 6th and the 12th, were actually running concurrently?
Wait, you're suggesting two entirely different pharaohs with two different royal courts ruling at the exact same time?
Yes.
How does that even work practically?
You have to remember the geography of Egypt. It is essentially a 1,000-mile-long river. Historically, Egypt was deeply culturally divided into Upper Egypt in the arid south and Lower Egypt in the fertile delta of the north.
Right, the two kingdoms.
The traditional history we rely on today is largely based on the writings of an Egyptian priest named Manetho, who lived centuries later.
Okay, what did he do?
Manetho made a king list, but he listed all the kings sequentially.
Ah, I see where this is going. If I took a list of all the U.S. presidents,
Right.
and then took a list of all the UK prime ministers, and I just stacked them back to back into one giant list instead of placing them side by side on a timeline, I would accidentally create a history that is twice as long as reality.
That is exactly the error Habermill believes occurred. While standard history assumes Manetho's list is a linear succession of kings, Habermill argues that for long extended periods, there were concurrent pharaohs ruling different regions of the country.
Oh, wow.
Under her reconstructed timeline, the 6th dynasty was ruling Upper Egypt in the south, and the 12th dynasty was ruling Lower Egypt in the north at the exact same time.
So how does overlapping these kings solve the massive 200-year Exodus timeline problem?
Because if these dynasties were concurrent, it means the total devastating collapse that ended the 6th dynasty and the total devastating collapse that ended the 12th dynasty were actually the exact same historical event.
Oh, my goodness.
The Exodus plagues brought an abrupt, catastrophic end to both kingdoms simultaneously. Specifically, her research identifies Amenemhat IV as the pharaoh of the Exodus ruling in the north, and Pepi II as the ruler in the south. By synchronizing these two seemingly separate collapses into a single unified event, it effectively erases that artificial 400-year elongation in the secular timeline.
That makes perfect sense.
It brings the archaeological collapse of Egypt right into perfect, striking alignment with the 1440 BC date given in 1 Kings.
That is absolutely mind-blowing. It's like finding out two different history books were just describing the left and right side of the exact same battlefield at the exact same moment.
Exactly.
If Habermill's theory is right, and both kingdoms collapsed at once under the weight of these plagues, that level of devastation leaves a mark.
A huge march.
You can't just sweep a total societal collapse under the rug of history. So, did anyone in Egypt actually write about it while it was happening?
They did. And the document they left behind is perhaps one of the most haunting, visceral texts to survive antiquity.
Let's talk about the papyrus-laden I-344, more commonly known as the Ipuwer papyrus.
Yes, this is a phenomenal piece.
I am completely obsessed with this document. It is housed in the Dutch National Museum of Antiquities in Leiden. And when you look at it, it's just this fragile 4-meter-long strip of dried reeds. But the words on it are explosive.
It really is a phenomenal artifact. The Ipuwer papyrus is a long, continuous poem written in hieratic script.
Which is like cursive, right?
Yeah, hieratic is essentially the cursive form of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Because, you don't use monumental carved hieroglyphs on stone when your world is burning down.
No, those take months to carve.
Exactly. When society is collapsing, a scribe grabs a reed pen, dips it in ink, and writes furiously on papyrus.
Makes sense.
The author identifies himself as Ipuwer, which roughly translates to Ipu the Venerable. He was likely a real historical figure, potentially a high-ranking official or an overseer of singers.
And what is he actually writing about?
The text itself is an admonition. It's a desperate, anguished dialogue where Ipuwer is complaining to the Lord of all about a nation that has been thrown into absolute, terrifying chaos.
And when you read the modern English translation of this papyrus side by side with the Book of Exodus, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up.
They really do.
It is an almost beat-for-beat retelling of the plagues from the perspective of the victim. Let's just run through some of these stunning parallels from our source material.
Let's do it.
So Ipuwer writes, "There's blood everywhere. Lo, the river is blood. One thirsts for water."
Which is an undeniable, direct, and literal parallel to the first biblical plague described in Exodus chapter 7.
Right.
Moses and Aaron strike the waters of the Nile, and the river turns to blood. And the biblical text explicitly states that the Egyptians could not drink the water of the Nile.
They couldn't drink it at all.
They had to frantically dig around the riverbanks just to find potable drinking water.
Yeah.
So Ipuwer's specific lament that one thirsts for water while staring at a river of blood matches this perfectly.
It wasn't just a terrifying discoloration then.
No, it was an acute ecological disaster that ruined their primary life-giving water source.
Then Ipuwer writes about the state of the agriculture, the farming. He says, "Lo, trees are felled, branches stripped, grain is lacking on all sides, birds find neither fruit nor herbs."
We are seeing the exact devastating aftermath described in the plagues of hail and locusts.
Exodus 9, right?
Yes, Exodus 9 describes an unprecedented hailstorm striking down every plant of the field and shattering every tree. Following that storm, the locusts in Exodus 10 arrive in an immense swarm to devour whatever the hail left behind.
Just wiping out whatever survived.
Exactly. The biblical text states, "Not a green thing remained, neither tree nor plant of the field." Ipuwer is standing in that exact aftermath. He is witnessing a lush, agricultural superpower stripped entirely bare.
Then there is the mention of absolute, suffocating darkness. Ipuwer simply says, "The land is without light."
This correlates directly with the 9th plague. Exodus 10 describes a pitch, unnatural darkness that fell over all the land of Egypt for 3 days.
A darkness that could be felt.
Yeah, a darkness so thick and heavy, the text says it could literally be felt.
But here's where the papyrus gets truly chilling, where it moves from ecological disaster to human tragedy. Ipuwer writes, "Groaning is throughout the land, mingled with lament."
It's just devastating.
And then he records this horrific detail. He says, "Lo, many dead are buried in the river. He who puts his brother in the ground is everywhere."
This is the grim reality of the aftermath of the 10th plague. Exodus 12 records that at midnight there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead, following the plague of the firstborn.
Oh, wow.
The sheer scale of sudden death in Ipuwer is describing a mortality rate so high that standard burial practices completely collapse.
Right, because there are just too many bodies.
Burials become ubiquitous everywhere you look, and the very streams become makeshift graves. It aligns flawlessly with the catastrophic sudden mortality of that final biblical plague.
And finally, there's this bizarre, highly specific socioeconomic detail that almost solidifies the connection beyond a shadow of a doubt for me.
Oh, the jewelry.
Yes. Ipuwer notes that suddenly female slaves are wearing gold, lapis lazuli, silver, and malachite on their necks. He's complaining bitterly that the entire social order has been inverted.
Right.
The wealthy are turned out of their mansions, and the lowest-ranking servants are walking around wearing priceless royal jewelry.
Which is exactly the sequence of events detailed in Exodus 12.
It's the plundering.
Yes. Before the Israelites leave, Moses instructs them to ask their Egyptian neighbors for articles of silver and gold. The text says the Lord gave them favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and they essentially plundered the empire of its wealth without lifting a single sword.
Just a massive, bloodless transfer of wealth.
Exactly. The newly freed slaves walked out of the country adorned in the greatest treasures of the empire. Ipuwer's total shock and disgust at seeing lowly slaves wearing lapis lazuli and gold on their necks is the exact Egyptian perspective of that plundering.
It's the black box data playing back the crash. It really is.
It's an incredible record.
But here is the massive question I have for you. Why these specific plagues?
Was it just a random assortment of natural disasters calculated to cause maximum economic damage? I mean, why frogs? Why not earthquakes or tornadoes?
The plagues were not random at all.
Okay.
To the ancient Egyptian mind, this sequence of events was not just physical destruction. It was a highly systematic, surgical, theological dismantling of the entire Egyptian pantheon.
The gods?
Yes, the Egyptians worshipped the natural world around them.
So it was a war of the gods.
Exactly. By turning the life-giving Nile to blood, God was utterly defeating Hapi, the revered god of the Nile and the bringer of fertility.
Right.
The plague of frogs was a direct, humiliating assault on Hecate, the goddess of childbirth and creation, who was literally depicted in their temples with the head of a frog.
Oh, wow. So he uses their own symbol against them.
Yes. The plague of massive hail rained down from the sky, defeating Nut, the goddess of the sky who was supposed to stretch over the earth and protect it.
And the darkness. The 3 days of pitch darkness was the ultimate, silencing defeat of Ra, the supreme sun god of Egypt. And finally, the death of the firstborn defeated Isis, the protector of children.
Which shatters the Pharaoh's power too, right?
It completely shattered the illusion of the supposedly divine Pharaoh himself, who, despite his claimed deity, could not even protect his own heir from the hand of Yahweh.
So it was a profound spiritual war fought on a physical, ecological battlefield. God was essentially systematically proving, I possess sovereign authority over every single entity you falsely claim has power.
That's exactly it.
Oh, and before we move on, there is a fascinating geographical footnote from our sources regarding the Ipuwer papyrus.
Yes, the West emptying.
Right. The researcher Zeev Ehrlich noted a very specific line where Ipuwer says, the West emptied.
And that detail has incredible implications for biblical geography. While traditional modern maps often place the Israelite land of Goshen in the eastern delta of the Nile, Ehrlich and others suggest that the phrase, the West emptied, might point to Goshen actually being located in the Fayum Valley.
And where is that exactly?
It's a lush depression in the western part of Egypt. When millions of Israelites suddenly departed, that entire western region would have rapidly and noticeably depopulated overnight, leading to Ipuwer's observation.
That makes perfect sense.
It's a testament to how these ancient, fragile texts can continually refine our modern understanding of where these biblical events actually took place.
So we have the timeline theories mathematically aligning the collapses, and we have the Ipuwer papyrus giving us the eyewitness horror of the plagues.
Right.
But the narrative in our sources takes another incredible turn here because modern science has recently entered the chat.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah. While theologians rightly look at the plagues as spiritual judgments, secular scientists and epidemiologists have been looking at the mechanisms of the plagues. They are asking, how did this physically happen in the natural world?
This is a highly active, fascinating field of research. Scholars are actively looking for environmental, geological, or meteorological triggers that could naturally produce the exact sequence of events described in the book of Exodus.
And what do they find?
Well, in our source material, 2 massive scientific theories stand out as prime candidates. A violent El Nino Southern Oscillation climate shift, commonly known as ENOS, and the Bronze Age eruption of the Santorini volcano, also known as Thera.
Let's start with the ENSO climate shift because epidemiologists map this out as a biological domino effect, and it is just wild.
It really is. If we look at the research of climatologists, they propose that an aberrant extreme El Nino weather pattern brought unseasonable, intense warming to the ancient Mediterranean.
Okay.
This dramatically altered the climate of the Egyptian coast.
But how does unseasonable warmth turn a flowing river into a river of blood?
It's essentially an extreme supercharged version of what we see in modern oceans. An intense warming of the Nile's waters, pushing ambient temperatures up dramatically, combined with drought conditions that slow the river's flow.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It creates the perfect, stagnant breeding ground for massive, toxic algal blooms. Specifically, an incredibly severe red tide caused by dinoflagellates.
Dinoflagellates.
Yeah. This microscopic algae suffocates the waterways, rapidly deoxygenates the water, kills the fish en masse, and literally dyes the water a thick, deep blood red color.
Wait, so the water turns toxic, the oxygen is depleted, and the fish die. That's the first plague right there.
Exactly.
But think about the ecosystem. If the river is choked with dead fish and toxic red algae, the amphibians that live in the reeds, the frogs would have absolutely nowhere to go but out of the water and onto the land. Are you telling me a red tide naturally forces a frog plague?
That is precisely the biological mechanism. The frogs flee the toxic anoxic water in massive unnatural swarms. But without their natural aquatic habitat and exposed to the searing, unseasonable heat, they rapidly die off on the riverbanks and in the fields.
Plague 2. Frogs. But now you have millions of dead frogs.
The dominoes continue to fall. Now you have tons of rotting fish and millions of frog carcasses covering the land. This massive, unprecedented amount of decaying flesh becomes an unparalleled breeding ground for insects.
Gross.
Right. Flies, gnats, lice, mosquitoes. The populations multiply exponentially without the frogs there to eat them.
Plagues 3 and 4.
And those insects aren't just an annoyance. They are potent vectors for severe disease. Scientists postulate that these specific swarms carried endemic African diseases like Rift Valley fever and West Nile virus.
And what does Rift Valley fever do?
It heavily and lethally impacts ruminants, cattle, sheep, livestock.
Which perfectly aligns with the 5th plague, the sudden death of the Egyptian livestock.
Exactly. And certain species of flies, like the culicoids biting midge, bite and burrow into the skin of both animals and humans. In these highly unsanitary conditions, these bites lead to severe bacterial infections, causing necrotic nodules and agonizing blisters.
The 6th plague, boils.
Yes.
And I remember a crazy fun fact from our sources about this.
Oh, about the mummy.
Yeah. The mummified remains of Pharaoh Thutmose II, who ruled in the 1500s BC, actually has visible, deep scars from a severe skin infection or epidemic of boils that survived the embalming process.
It is a remarkable piece of physical evidence. It proves that severe, disfiguring skin diseases were impacting even the highest, most protected royalty of Egypt during this general era.
It is wild.
Now, moving past the biological plagues, the sudden atmospheric shifts in the ENSO climate pattern could also easily trigger violent supercell storms.
Like the hail.
Yes. Massive pressure drops blowing from the desert would bring unprecedented hailstorms, the 7th plague, which would destroy the standing crops. Following the storm, shifting atmospheric wind patterns could carry immense cyclical swarms of desert locusts into the fertile delta to consume whatever the hail missed.
The 8th plague.
Right.
It's a terrifying, scientifically plausible chain reaction. But what about the Santorini volcano? How does a volcano hundreds of miles away in the Mediterranean Sea fit into this?
The eruption of the Santorini caldera was one of the single largest volcanic events in human history.
Wow.
The sheer volume of ash, pumice, and sulfuric gas ejected into the stratosphere would have had catastrophic multi-year effects across the entire eastern Mediterranean. And here's where we find incredible corroboration in ancient Egyptian medical texts.
This blew my mind when I read it, because we aren't just looking at the poetic lament of Ipuwer anymore. We are looking at literal clinical medical prescriptions from ancient doctors trying to treat the fallout.
Yes. There are 6 different major medical papyri, including the London Medical Papyrus, the Ebers Papyrus, the Hurst Papyrus, and the Carlsberg Papyrus, that date to this general era of upheaval.
And what do they prescribe?
They contain urgent treatments for very specific, highly unusual ailments that you wouldn't expect to see in normal Egyptian life. They describe complex treatments for severe, widespread burns caused by particulate matter and dissolved acids falling from the sky.
Acid rain burns.
Exactly.
The ash mixes with the moisture in the air and burns the skin of the people below.
Precisely. Which is entirely clinically compatible with volcanic ash fallout. The famous Ebers Papyrus also details treatments for serious respiratory ailments coherent with the mass inhalation of toxic aerosol substances.
Essentially, the population was choking on volcanic ash.
Yes. Furthermore, a massive, dense ash plume blocking out the sun for days provides a very compelling natural mechanism for the 9th plague. the 3 days of palpable darkness.
And there's also the Edwin Smith surgical papyrus in this collection, right? What does that one tell us?
The Edwin Smith papyrus is incredibly telling because it is fundamentally a trauma manual for military surgeons treating wounded soldiers on the battlefield.
Okay, so it's a war manual.
Right. But the context of the text and the way it was being used provides profound insight into a society undergoing severe sociopolitical collapse.
Gosh, so.
The doctors were suddenly dealing with mass casualties, crushing injuries, and chaos in the civilian population in the aftermath of these compounded ecological disasters.
Oh, I see.
It paints a clinical picture of a nation completely destabilized, its infrastructure ruined, which perfectly sets the historical stage for the successful escape of a massive enslaved labor force.
I have to pause here, though, and pose a genuine challenge on behalf of the listener.
Okay, go ahead.
Because when I hear this, I feel a tension. If modern scientists can explain away the plagues of Egypt using a cascading El Nino weather pattern or the fallout of a volcanic eruption, doesn't that inherently remove God from the equation?
Yeah, that's a very common concern.
Right. If we have a perfectly natural mechanism for a red tide and a frog migration, doesn't that diminish the miracle? Are we just saying Moses got incredibly lucky with a freak weather event?
That is a crucial question, and it is a tension many people feel when science and scripture intersect. But in the biblical worldview, faith and science do not have to be enemies.
Okay, explain that.
God is the sovereign author of creation. The miracle is not necessarily that God used a magic wand to temporarily break the laws of physics. The miracle is his absolute sovereign command over the natural world he himself designed.
So he uses the tools that are already in his own toolbox. He wrote the laws of nature so he can leverage them.
Exactly. The miraculous divine nature of the plagues lies in 3 specific things: the timing, the intensity, and the protection.
Let's break those down. The timing.
Moses announced the plagues exactly before they happened. They were not random surprises.
Right, he called them out.
Yes, and the intensity was highly localized to Egypt and entirely unprecedented. And crucially, the protection. The Israelites living in the land of Goshen were physically protected from the fallout.
They didn't get hit by the hail or the darkness.
Exactly. God, using the mechanics of his own creation, a distant volcano, a shifting climate pattern, a biological insect swarm to free. His people doesn't diminish his power, it actually magnifies his authority.
Wow.
It proves definitively that the natural world answers to him alone, not to the false, localized nature gods of Egypt.
He commands the wind, the waves, the volcanoes, and the algae. That is a profound, faith-affirming way to view the science. Take a moment to let these discoveries sink in as we listen to a melody of the land.
I came in tired, dust on my shoes, hands full of nothing, heart full of blues. You met me quiet by the old front gate. You said my name and I came awake. Now I'm leaning and hear me say it slow. You never let me go. You never let me go. Open the door, I'm coming home. Open the door, I'm not
Welcome back to the Holy Land Path.
We've spent the first half of this deep dive looking at the complex chronological debates, the stunning eyewitness account of the Ipuwer papyrus, and the scientific mechanisms of the plagues that brought the Egyptian superpower to its knees.
We really covered a lot of ground.
We did. But now, let's look at what happened next. Once the plagues shattered Egypt's defenses and the Israelites crossed the sea, they entered the wilderness of Sinai, eventually making their way toward Canaan.
Yes, the biblical narrative shifts drastically here. It goes from liberation from slavery to a perilous journey through the desert and eventually to the conquest of a new land.
And the archaeological question becomes, do we actually see evidence of these wandering Israelites in the historical record of the wilderness in Canaan? I mean, do they leave a footprint in the sand?
To answer that, we have to turn back to the extensive findings of the brilliant Egyptologist Dr. Manfred Betak. Because the Egyptians didn't just stop writing things down after the Exodus.
No, they were obsessed with keeping records.
Exactly. They kept meticulous border records. And in the military and administrative records from the New Kingdom period, the Egyptian border patrols frequently complain about a very specific, frustrating group of people causing them trouble in the eastern deserts.
And who were they?
The Egyptians called them the Shasu.
The Shasu.
Yes. To an Egyptian scribe, the Shasu were a nomadic, Bedouin-type people who roamed the harsh deserts and the wilderness regions east of Egypt.
And why were they such a problem?
In the Egyptian texts, they are often described with disdain as a constant annoyance. They are moving with massive flocks of sheep and goats, living in temporary tent shelters, refusing to integrate into settled society, and occasionally clashing with Egyptian border forts looking for water rights.
That sounds exactly like the Israelites wandering in the wilderness.
It does. But the Shasu aren't just generic random nomads. There is a very specific linguistic and theological connection in the ruins that ties them directly to the biblical narrative.
Okay, what is the connection?
What's fascinating here is a specific geographic and theological reference carved into stone. Egyptian texts mention a region in the territory of Edom, or Ser, which is the rugged, mountainous area south and east of the Dead Sea.
I know that area.
The Egyptians continually associate this specific region with the Shasu. Crucially, in a topographical list carved into the pillars of the Temple of Soleb.
The Temple of Soleb.
Yes, which was built by Pharaoh Amenhotep III, there is a clear hieroglyphic reference to the Shasu of Yahweh.
Wait, let that sink in for a second. Deep in an Egyptian temple, a pillar mentions the Shasu of Yahweh.
It is incredible. This is the earliest known mention of the divine name Yahweh anywhere in the archaeological record.
Wow.
It is used by the Egyptians either as a place name or as the specific deity worshipped by these particular Shasu nomads residing in the region of Ser.
And how does that connect biblically?
When you open the Bible and read ancient Israelite poetry, like the Song of Deborah in Judges chapter 5, it says, "Lord, when you went out from Ser, when you marched from the land of Edom, the earth shook."
Oh man, the geographical alignment there is perfect.
The geographical alignment and the specific theological alignment between the Egyptian records of the Shasu of Yahweh and the biblical Israelites wandering in that exact desert is incredibly, undeniably strong.
And there is a piece of physical evidence that brings these Shasu right back into the heart of Egypt, too. We have to talk about the incredible architectural discovery at Medinet Habu.
Oh, this is one of the most brilliant, unexpected pieces of archaeology. At Medinet Habu in western Thebes, which is located deep in southern Egypt, archaeologists from the University of Chicago were excavating the precinct of a massive ancient mortuary temple belonging to Ramses III.
Okay.
And right there, nestled jarringly amidst the traditional Egyptian architecture, they uncovered the stone foundations of a classic four-room house.
For the listener who isn't an architect, what exactly is a four-room house, and why does finding one in Egypt matter so much?
The four-room house is the absolute architectural signature of the ancient Israelites. It is a highly specific floor plan, a central, unroofed courtyard surrounded by 3 rectangular rooms, often utilizing distinct pillared walls.
Okay, so it's a very unique design.
Highly unique. If you dig up a site anywhere in Iron Age Canaan and find a four-room house, you are almost certainly digging up an Israelite settlement. It is their cultural fingerprint.
So finding one deep in southern Egypt is highly anomalous.
Very. Dr. Betak suggests that this specific house was built by Shasu, prisoners of war, who had been captured by Ramses III during his later military campaigns into the wilderness.
They were brought back to Egypt?
Yes, they were brought back to Egypt in chains and put to work. Specifically, their grueling job was to dismantle older, ruined temples to build new ones. And while they were forced to live there, they built a house for themselves in their own native Proto-Israelite architectural style using mud brick.
It's like finding a distinctively American log cabin sitting right in the middle of the Roman Forum.
That's a great comparison.
It proves that these Shasu, these Proto-Israelite people who worshipped Yahweh, were a recognized, distinct cultural group interacting with and sometimes being captured by the Egyptian Empire.
Exactly.
But okay, so they are in the wilderness. Eventually, under the leadership of Joshua, the Israelites cross the Jordan River and begin the military conquest of the Promised Land, Canaan. Do we have any historical records from the Canaanites themselves about this massive invasion?
We do, and it comes to us in the form of an ancient diplomatic crisis. In the late 19th century, local Egyptian farmers digging for fertilizer discovered a massive cache of baked clay tablets at a site called Tel El Amarna.
The Amarna letters.
Yes. These tablets, now globally known as the Amarna letters, are a sprawling archive of diplomatic correspondence dating to the 14th century BC.
What language are they in?
They are written in Akkadian cuneiform, which was the international language of diplomacy at the time. It's correspondence between the Egyptian pharaohs, specifically Amenhotep III, and his son Akhenaten, and their vassal kings residing in Canaan.
We have to remember the geopolitics here for the listener. Canaan at this time was not an independent country.
No, not at all.
It was essentially a colonial province under heavy Egyptian military oversight. The Canaanite city-states, places like Jerusalem, Megiddo, Lachish, they had their own local mayors or kings, but they ultimately answered to Pharaoh and paid him tribute.
Precisely. And these letters are not stylized poetry or polished royal propaganda. They are frantic, desperate, raw administrative reports.
What are they saying?
The Canaanite kings are writing letter after letter to Pharaoh, begging for Egyptian archers and military support because their lands are being systematically attacked, subverted, and overrun.
And who's attacking them? What do they call this invading force?
A group of people the Canaanite kings refer to as the Habiru, or sometimes pronounced Ipuwer.
The Habiru. That sounds incredibly similar to Hebrew.
It does, and the linguistic, historical, and sociological overlap between the Habiru and the biblical Hebrews is one of the most hotly debated, fascinating topics in biblical archaeology. Let's look at a specific, desperate plea. Letter 287, written by a man named Abdi-Heba, who was the Canaanite king of Jerusalem.
Let me just set the scene for the listener here. Imagine you are the mayor of a heavily fortified hill country city. You are watching your entire region slowly collapse around you. Your supply lines are cut. You write to your commander-in-chief in Egypt, who is completely ignoring you. What does Abdi-Heba actually say?
He writes in a state of total panic. He says, the Habiru are taking over the lands of the king. He complains bitterly that there is no Egyptian garrison left to protect them.
He's totally abandoned.
And then he starts pointing fingers at his neighboring Canaanite cities. He specifically names the kings of Gezer, Ashkelon, and Lachish, accusing them of treason. He says they are giving the Habiru food, oil, and supplies. He is basically screaming across the miles, my neighbors are betraying the crown, they are making treaties with the invaders, and if you don't send archers this very year, the entire province will fall to the Habiru.
But why wasn't Pharaoh sending archers? If his empire was collapsing, why didn't Egypt respond?
That is the brilliant geopolitical context of the Amarna period. The pharaoh receiving these letters was Akhenaten. He is famous for being the heretic king.
Why was he a heretic?
Akhenaten was completely obsessed with a radical religious revolution, trying to force Egypt to worship a single sun disk, the Aten. He moved the capital city out into the desert to a place called Amarna, completely isolating himself.
So he just dropped all his other responsibilities.
He essentially ignored his foreign policy and let the empire rot while he focused on his religious poetry. The Canaanite kings were screaming into the void while the Habiru dismantled their territories.
I see. So the geopolitical stage was perfectly historically set for Joshua's conquest to succeed without Egyptian interference. But I want to push back on the identity of the Habiru for a second, because some secular scholars argue that Habiru wasn't an ethnic term at all. They say it was just a broad, derogatory sociological word for outlaws, mercenaries, or stateless nomads. They argue it doesn't strictly mean Hebrews.
That is a fair, nuanced, scholarly distinction. The term Habiru is indeed used across the wider ancient Near East over several centuries to describe various populations that operate outside the established, settled social order of the city-states.
Like a catch-all term.
Right. It was a term for people who didn't pay taxes and didn't bow to the local king. But think about how the entrenched elite Canaanite kings would have viewed the arriving Israelites under Joshua.
Right. If I am the king of Jerusalem, I don't see the Israelites as a recognized nation with a capital city and diplomats. I see a massive, terrifying influx of nomadic, militant, untaxed tribes operating completely outside my Canaanite political system, claiming the land for themselves. To a settled mayor, that is the definition of Habiru.
Exactly. To the king of Jerusalem, the Israelites were the ultimate Habiru. Even if the term was originally a broad sociological slur for stateless troublemakers, the biblical Israelites perfectly, flawlessly fit that exact description during the period of the conquest.
That makes so much sense.
The Amarna letters describe the exact geographic region, the central hill country of Canaan, cities like Lachish and Gezer, being slowly stripped away from Canaanite control by these Habiru invaders. It aligns beautifully with the narrative of the book of Joshua, showing us the brutal reality of the conquest from the panicked, boots-on-the-ground perspective of the people being conquered.
So look at what we've uncovered today. We have the timeline mathematically bridged by Habermel's concurrent dynasties. We have the Ipuwer papyrus documenting the absolute horror of the plagues from the inside. We have rigorous scientific models showing how God could have used the mechanics of nature to utterly judge the gods of Egypt. We have the Shasu of Yahweh wandering in the wilderness, building their four-room houses. And we have the Habiru terrifying the kings of Canaan in the Amarna letters, while Pharaoh ignores them.
It's an overwhelming amount of evidence.
We have covered so much historical ground today, but we aren't just historians, we are believers. So what does this all mean for the listener today?
This brings us to our lesson of the week, where we look at the deep spiritual themes that emerge from the archaeology. And today, I want to focus intensely on the themes of truth, heritage, and continuity.
I love that. Let's dive into it.
If you study ancient empires, particularly Egypt, you quickly learn that they functioned on an absolute machinery of propaganda. The pharaohs were considered literal gods on earth, and gods do not lose. Therefore, they never ever recorded their defeats on their massive temple walls. If a battle ended in a bloody draw, they carved it into the stone as a glorious, crushing victory. If they lost an entire army in the sea, they simply didn't write it down. The official record is always flawless.
You never see a hieroglyph of Pharaoh running away in terror.
Never. And yet, despite the silence of the official monuments, the truth of the Exodus survived. It didn't survive because it was carved into an Egyptian obelisk. It survived because it was carried in the collective memory, the sacred texts, and the living, breathing faith of a liberated people.
Wow.
But the physical scars on the land of Egypt remained, as we see in the frantic, unedited poetry of Ipuwer and the desperate trauma treatments of the medical papyri. The official monuments tried to hide the truth. But the truth was so massive, so earth-shattering, that it bled through the cracks of history anyway.
That is so deeply powerful, because it applies directly to the faith of our listeners right now. In the book of Exodus, the central driving mandate of the Passover is not just to eat the meal or perform a ritual. The mandate is to tell it to your children.
Yes.
The faith is built on the transmission of reality, on memory, on truth. Discovering these ancient echoes, a determinative symbol on a stela, a lament on a fragile papyrus, a four-room mud brick house in Medinet Habu, it doesn't invent our faith. Our faith was already there, secure in the Word. What archaeology does is it beautifully illustrates it.
Yes.
It anchors the profound spiritual reality into a hard, undeniable historical reality. It reminds us that God's deliverance of Israel was not a mythic fable set in a nebulous once upon a time. It was a real event happening in real time, dealing with real, massive geopolitical empires.
And for the evangelical believer, the theological comfort there is immense. The God who possessed the authority to historically dismantle the greatest superpower of the ancient world to free slaves is the exact same God who operates in our lives today. His sovereignty is continuous. His power over the natural world and over human empires has not diminished.
Truth, heritage, and continuity. I want to leave you, the listener, with one final lingering thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. Consider this fact. The only reason we are even reading the Ipuwer papyrus today, the only reason secular scholars are painstakingly translating the Amarna letters or examining the grammar of the Merneptah Stela, is because we are looking for the Israelites.
That's right.
The mighty Egyptian empire, with its massive stone statues, its gold, its chariots, and its absolute geopolitical power, is now just a subject of study. It's a silent museum exhibit. But the descendants of the Hebrew slaves, they oppressed. They're still reading the exact same Torah, they're worshiping the exact same God, and they're living in the exact same promised land today. When you look through the muddy waters of history, ask yourself, who really won the battle of endurance? Be sure to hit the follow button to stay connected with the footsteps of the Lord and his Lamb.
May the peace of Jerusalem be with you. We leave you with this melody of faith.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hey. I'm waking up to a brand new sky, watching the shadows say their last goodbye. Yesterday's failures are buried in the deep, a promise kept while the world was asleep. I feel the rhythm of a heart set free. Your light is shining all over me. Every breath is a gift I'm taking, every moment is a world you're making. The old is gone, the new has begun. Your mercies are new every morning, like the sun through the clouds without warning. A river of grace that's starting to flow. Everywhere I look, everywhere I go, I'm singing a song that's wild and true. Everything's beautiful, everything's new. I'm walking out with a smile on my face, living in the sunshine of your amazing grace. No more